Hey guys, welcome back to more Ripe Stories. In this video, a smug neighbor repeatedly stole gasoline from me that I needed for my tractor and other farming equipment. Here is why you never mess with a farmer. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. So I own a large property that even with all that land is still classified as a small farm. It is 800 acres though, so the only way for me to really reliably get around and do everything I need in a day is to use my tractor. That is not the only piece of equipment that I use though, but I will get a little more into that later. Mainly, my farm is filled with different types of crops, and I also have a small tree orchard where I grow apples. The crops mostly get sold to local grocery stores that buy from me in bulk. I don't like wasting crops though, so the ones that are too ugly to be a part of a grocery store have a few different purposes. Years ago, I did not even realize how much I was wasting honestly, but my wife taught me that there are a lot more things that can be pickled and preserved than I thought. Between that and a little bit of private selling, my waste is nearly none. The people that live around me for the most part are good and decent people. Some of them are the ones that buy the crops or pickled veggies from us. I have a neighbor that is a bit more of a rancher than a farmer, and he is always a reliable way for me to buy eggs and milk. A few miles down is another rancher that is always good to buy meat from. It's a bit of an old lifestyle, but it honestly works out pretty great. I think my favorite is the time of year when the apples are ready and people from town come onto the farm and can do their own apple picking. I might make more money to pick them myself and sell them in bulk to a store, but part of me loves seeing families and kids get excited to come every year. It was also around this time of year that I started to notice some problems. I mentioned before about having a bunch of equipment, and all of those things run on gasoline the same way a car does. Also for context, most of my equipment is really old, so that is why most of my things run on gasoline and not diesel. I know that most modern farming equipment runs on diesel, but I just did not make the switch yet. I love old things. On the property, I have a fuel tank, which is fairly common around here. Once every couple of weeks, a truck comes by, and when I run low on gasoline, I can get it filled up. I tend to get it filled off every time, and that way I never run out totally. After one of the days people came for apple picking, I went to fill up my tractor and noticed that the levels on the fuel tank were extremely low. It had just been filled a few days ago, but was already down to less than half. At first I thought I had a leak or something, but after looking around there did not seem to be any damage. I had to be careful or else I was gonna run out completely before the next gas truck came around. I limited myself to just using the one cherry picker and was lucky that no crops were ready to harvest that week. Plus my tractor was getting a little less use and my legs a bit more when I didn't need to venture out too far. I did manage to barely make it before getting my fuel tank refilled and spending more than usual to do it because I had to basically fill the entire thing. And just like everybody else, I'm not happy at the current cost of gas. The truck driver also confirmed for me that there was not a leak or anything. That only left the idea that somebody had been stealing gas from me when I was off doing other things, and since there were a lot of people coming and going because of the apple picking, cars around there were not exactly suspicious. Well, I had a bit of a plan though in order to catch the person doing this. First of all, I moved where people could park to just a small area instead of letting them park more freely. The second thing I was gonna do was keep a closer eye on my fuel tank and see if I noticed a car or anybody hanging around it. I did not want to set up cameras or anything crazy. I had two sets of good eyes between my wife and I and planned to use them. I figured since it was full again, it would attract the thief. Apple picking continued and nobody seemed to be hanging around that area. I also did not notice any people coming back over and over or anything to pick apples. I was actually starting to think that I had things wrong, but still I was marking every night before bed where the levels were, so if there was a drastic drop when I slept, I would be able to see exactly how much was taken. It was a bit stressful to be honest, thinking there was a thief around here. None of my neighbors seemed to be struggling on the business side of things, so I knew it was not some act of desperation. Plus, they knew that if they ran out and needed a little bit to get by, I would loan it to them. It's a pretty friendly area around here, and theft is not something that people end up getting caught up in a lot. Well, that's part of why it was so odd to end up happening. That night though, I heard some noises like a car door closing and went to my window to look outside. It was around midnight and I was half asleep and groggy. There was a pickup truck with its lights on and everything, not even trying to hide. The man driving it got out and started using my fuel tank to fill up a ton of smaller canisters and put them into his truck. I did not say anything or even leave the house. I instead got a pen and paper and started writing down a description of the car, including the license plate, which was visible because the idiot decided to leave his lights on. I'm not saying be a criminal, but if you're going to do something illegal, maybe be sneaky about it. I mean, realistically, don't though, because if you're doing illegal things, just stay stupid and get caught. Well, now would be the time most people think I call the police with this information and get the guy nailed, right? I did not do that though, and instead felt like I wanted to see what exactly he was doing with all of this gasoline. I left and got into my own car while he was still busy stealing my gas. I kept my lights off and waited for him to leave before following him at a bit of a distance. I did not want to bring a gun or anything because I didn't want to fight him, I just wanted to see what he was doing. Keep in mind this was the middle of the night, but he was making several stops at local businesses. They were giving him cash and he was handing over a container with my gasoline in it. After following him for a while and taking note of where he went, I ended up going home and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I did not have much evidence to take to the police, and I knew that if I ran into the businesses demanding his information and my gas back, they might not have done it. So I decided to be sneaky. I went back to all those businesses during the day and started to speak to the owners. I was talking about how the truck I use for gas was getting expensive and if they knew any cheaper options for getting gas around here. They all started telling me about a guy who works at night and gives it at a discount. The only problem is he sells it in very small batches that would be good for a business but maybe not good for a farm. I still got the information of the guy from them and then thanked them as if I was considering using him. All the while when in the end I was recording it all and getting evidence that this guy goes around selling the gasoline cheaper than the truck does. I honestly don't know where he was getting it before stealing from me, but I doubt it was legitimate. I don't blame the businesses as they had no way of knowing what they were buying was stolen. I only blame the guy for stealing it in this case, and now I had enough information to file a police report against him. The statements from the business owners were useful, but the fact that I knew his license plate was an even bigger deal. Instead of trying to find him and hope he had some of the gasoline in the bed of his truck or something, the police decided to run a bit of a sting operation. The next time I got my fuel tank filled up, again they were going to wait and watch for him to show up and steal again. It took 2 nights, but on the second one, I was watching from the window again and saw the truck pull right up to my gas tank. Again, he had many canisters and was starting to fill them right up. Only this time, he had the pants scared off of him by the police who made themselves known and were telling him to stop. At first he tried to lie and claimed that he knew the owner and had permission to take it, not knowing it was a sting and just thinking he got caught. They brought me outside to tell me that he apparently had my permission. I told them I never met that man before in my life, and if he was taking out of my fuel tank, that meant he was simply stealing. He was then promptly arrested and despite being caught red-handed was still trying to come up with an excuse that would get him out of the entire situation. That did not exist though, and anything he was saying made no sense. Things like claiming he made a mistake and was at the wrong property, or that he needed the gas because it was an emergency. He did not know the other evidence I had against him. His arrest charge was later changed from theft to grand theft. They figured out by how much he stole added up to be about $10,000 worth of gasoline. He even admitted that he stole from me in the past, just in small amounts so I would not notice, but as he got more customers he needed more and figured he would just get away with it. I was also pressing charges and refusing to let him walk away after doing this kind of thing. I had restricted use of my equipment for weeks because of him and wanted to make sure he was gonna pay both in money and in punishment for what he had done. The business owners were all spoken to as well, and they denied knowing anything about it being stolen, which both police and I believed. I think they really thought he sold gasoline as like a real job. He told them it was cheaper because he did not need to pay for using a truck and instead drove with smaller amounts in the truck. A crappy story when you think about it, but I could imagine it being believable to somebody that was not looking too hard into it. Of course, the biggest thing for me was that he was forced to give me back the money equivalent of what he sold, something he tried to actually argue with. Since it was $10,000 worth of gas for me, but he had sold it for less, he felt he only owed me what he made off of it and not its actual value. It was a bit of a fight, but eventually I got the full $10K that I deserved to gain back. But that was not exactly the end of things. For something like grand theft, prison is not something that always happens, but it can depending on several factors. It turns out that this was not his first time in legal trouble for theft. He had a file going back years. It had petty theft, breaking into homes and stealing, etc. He seemed to just keep building up and getting worse every single time a judge gave him a break or another chance. His luck had run drier than he was trying to run my fuel tank though. From his past issue, he was given a prison sentence, and not a very lenient one at that, 5 to 10 years with a chance of probation. I can honestly imagine him sitting with these murderers and him explaining his crime to them. I was glad that with the money I got back, I was able to keep my fuel tank full again without worrying about the financial strain it would cause on my farm. My crops came in and I was able to harvest and sell them, so thankfully his timing did not completely screw up my business. Plus, it was nice not having to worry about a guy just being on my property in the middle of the night. If it continued, who knew what he would do next, especially since he had a history of breaking into homes. Update: a lot of you are asking me if the business owners were mad about me getting this guy arrested, and well, I just want to clear up that none of them have mentioned to me about being angry. I stopped them from buying stolen gas. Nobody likes a thief, and that includes those owners. Maybe some were a little sad they couldn't get cheap gas after all, but none thought that I was at fault for anything. And yeah guys, we all know you never mess with a farmer. That is the #1 rule, and apparently this stupid neighbor violated that one. He certainly got what he deserved. If you like the farmer stories, please don't forget to like the video, because that helps me tremendously. Thank you so much. The next one is a fantastic farmer revenge story. It is titled "A Farmer Got Tractor Revenge." So I am a farmer and I've been one my whole life. I took over the family farm after my father passed about 15 years ago. It's not a massive operation, but it's honest work, and the land has been in my family for 3 generations. My property sits about a mile outside of town. There's a factory that opened up nearby about 2 years ago, and that is when my troubles began. See, the company did not provide adequate parking for all their employees. Their lot fills up fast and the overflow has to find somewhere else to park. At first, it was just 1 or 2 cars parked along the edge of my field closest to the road. I did not make a fuss about it, live and let live, right? But then it grew. 5 cars became 10, 10 became 20. Before I knew it, about 30 cars were parking there every weekday, and they were venturing further onto my property. This might not sound like a big deal to city folks, but for a farmer, this is serious. They were compacting my soil, which affects drainage and crop growth. They even left trash behind: coffee cups, fast food wrappers, cigarette butts, and some even used the area as a public toilet when they thought nobody was looking. And all of this was happening on land that I paid taxes for, land that I work to maintain. I tried being reasonable, I really did. First I put up no parking signs, but they were ignored. Then I approached some of the parkers directly, explaining that this was private property and they could not park there. Most would nod and apologize, but they would be right back the next day, so I went to the factory management. "Not our problem," they said. "What employees do off company property is not our responsibility." Then I called the local police. They sent someone out once, but they said that they couldn't station an officer there every day and suggested I just tow the vehicles at my expense. After 6 months of this nonsense, I was at my wit's end. I tried being nice, I tried going through proper channels. Nothing worked. Last Monday morning, I watched from my kitchen window as the usual parade of cars pulled onto my land. I counted 32 vehicles in total. The drivers all got out, most of them offering a wave to each other before walking the short distance to the factory. None of them looked in my direction, none of them seemed to care that they were trespassing. Something inside me snapped. I finished my coffee, put on my work boots, and headed to the shed. I fired up my tractor, not the small one I use for light tasks, but the big one with the plow attachment. The engine roared to life and I felt a strange sense of calm coming over me. I drove the tractor to the field and began plowing, not where the cars were parked, but around them. I created a deep furrow, about 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep, that circled the entire parking area. It took me about an hour to complete the circuit. By the time I was done, all 32 vehicles were effectively trapped on an island of unplowed land in the middle of my field. I parked my tractor, went back to the house and continued with my day's work. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, I heard the first shouts. I looked out to see several people standing by their cars, clearly upset. Some were trying to drive through the plowed soil, their wheels spinning uselessly in the loose dirt. Others were on their phone, going crazy. By 5 o'clock there was a crowd. Someone must have called the local news station because a van with the channel logo pulled up on the road. A reporter and cameraman got out and started interviewing the stranded drivers. I watched from a distance as they pointed angrily in my direction. Eventually the police showed up, 2 patrol cars. One of the officers, someone I recognized from town, approached my front door. "Sir," he said after I invited him in, "there seems to be a situation with some vehicles on your property." "Is there?" I replied, offering him a cup of coffee, which he declined. "There are people trespassing on my private property and I'm plowing my field, as is my right as the landowner. The people out there are saying you've deliberately trapped them in their cars." I shrugged. "Well, I'm plowing in a pattern that works for me. Not my fault they parked where I need to work." The officer sighed. "Look, I know these folks have been parking here without permission. We've had this conversation before, but this approach is unconventional." "Is it illegal?" I asked. He hesitated. "Not technically, no. You have the right to plow your own field, but it's causing a disturbance." "Well, the disturbance was caused by 32 individuals trespassing on my property after repeated warnings not to do so," I countered. The conversation went back and forth like this for a while. In the end, the officer could not do much. He suggested that I provide a path for the cars to leave, but acknowledged that I was not legally obligated to do so. By nightfall, most of the drivers had given up and called for rides or walked home, leaving their vehicles stranded. The news ran a story on the evening broadcast, which painted me in a rather unflattering light. They interviewed several of the affected employees who said things like, "It is just unnecessary," and "he could have handled this differently." The next morning I woke up to find my phone ringing off the hook. The factory manager wanted to meet. The local paper wanted a statement. Even some of my neighbors called, some to support me, others to tell me that I had gone too far. I agreed to meet with the factory manager at my kitchen table. He brought the company's lawyer along, which immediately put me on edge. "What you've done is completely unacceptable," the manager began, not even waiting for me to offer coffee. "You have inconvenienced dozens of our employees and potentially disrupted our operations." "What's unacceptable," I replied calmly, "is that your company did not even plan adequate parking and your employees decided my private property was the solution." The lawyer cleared his throat. "We understand there's been a parking issue, but your response was disproportionate. Several employees are considering legal action for the intentional restrictions of their vehicle." I laughed at that. "Well, they were trespassing on clearly marked private property. I've documented every attempt I've made to resolve this peacefully. I have dated photographs of the no parking signs they have ignored, records of my calls to your office that went nowhere, and statements from witnesses who saw me personally ask drivers not to park there. If anyone has a legal case, it is me." The meeting ended in a stalemate. As they were leaving, I added, "By the way, those cars need to be removed by the end of the week, or I will have them towed at the owner's expense." That afternoon, the factory sent over a crew with wooden planks to create temporary bridges over my plowed furrows. One by one, the cars were carefully driven out. I stood watching, arms crossed, as each driver passed by. Some of them avoided eye contact and others glared daggers at me. A few looked genuinely remorseful. By Friday, the area was clear of vehicles and I noticed that the factory had hastily expanded their parking lot by clearing some adjacent land that they owned. The story made regional news and my phone continued to ring with calls from people I did not know. Some called me a hero for standing up to corporate bullies and others called me much less flattering names. It's been 2 weeks now and not a single unauthorized vehicle has parked on my land since the incident. The factory completed their parking expansion and while I occasionally get a dirty look when I go into town, many people actually pat me on the back. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for trapping these cars on my land? I know it was an extreme solution, but I tried everything else I could think of. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you would have done here. I think this was a brilliant solution to the problem, however, I'm curious what you would have done if you were in the farmer's shoes. Comment number 1, not the a-hole. The entitlement of these people is astounding. Imagine if you started using the factory's break room as your personal dining area or set up a farm stand in their lobby. They would have removed you immediately. Comment number 2, soft ESH. They should have parked there, but trapping their cars seems excessive. Could you have tried putting up a fence first or maybe parking your own equipment to block the area? Comment number 3, you're the a-hole big-time farmer boy. I get it, they shouldn't have parked there, but come on man, you trapped working people who are just trying to make a living, not criminals. My cousin works at that factory and had to miss his kid's doctor's appointment because of your little stunt. You think you're teaching them a lesson, but all you did was punish people living paycheck to paycheck who don't make the parking decisions. You could have blocked it off before they parked, but put up a cheap barbed wire fence or hell, charged them $5 a day for parking and made some cash instead of being a spiteful jerk. Now half the town thinks that you're that crazy tractor guy. Good luck selling at the farmer's market after this PR disaster. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/malicious compliance. It is titled, "Don't believe me that I have severe bowel issues? Well, enjoy having a clogged and fleeced toilet." Background: due to medications and bad genetics, I'm not in any way regular. Anytime at a new job or new location, I look for the most powerful toilet there to not inconvenience people. You know, those air pressurized ones that sound like a jet is going off, those usually can survive. Well, years ago I worked in an old 3-story building. 3rd floor employee bathroom has your standard low-flow worthless toilet. Anytime nature called, I would make my way down the stairs to the lobby and use the more updated pressurized toilets, and let me just say that with all of the supplements I take to make the job easier, you could have days off if not weeks of filler for the toilet in a matter of seconds. Of course, new manager comes in not liking that I am taking 30-minute toilet breaks, walking all the way down to the lobby, walking all the way back up, and he demands that I use the employee toilet down the hall. Cue malicious compliance. Now you can imagine the problems this now causes. At least once every 2 weeks, the toilet is stuck, the plumber is stuck, and not the best smell of course. It shuts down that employee toilet, so now everyone has to go down at least 1 floor to use someone else's toilet, so everyone is taking more time, and he finally believes me. But hey, I don't have a doctor's note that I need a more powerful toilet because that's stupid, but maybe just let me go down to the lobby to not inconvenience every single person here and make their rest of their day for 2 or 3 days more miserable. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching, please don't forget to subscribe and I will see you again tomorrow.